Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Screen Chat. This is our continuing monthly mini-series exploring the history, roles, and functions of the various non-player characters your party can encounter in the exciting world of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. For this episode, I hope you're all ready to get down and dirty, because we are exploring everyone's favorite jiggling, living garbage disposals, oozes. Oozes are described as a category of creatures that generally resemble amorphous blobs and can include slimes, jellies, ochres, and puddings. They are usually found in either underground cave or cavern systems, or in dark, damp locations such as dungeons or catacombs. They thrive in the dark, shunning areas of bright light and extreme temperatures like the world's first antisocial dessert monsters. An ooze doesn't touch grass, they simply eat it. Instead, they use their environment's cold, damp temperatures to keep their body temperatures regular and their forms jiggly while feeding on anything that moves or gets in their way. This leaves them with plenty of time to do normal slime activities, like dripping from walls and ceilings, marking their territory by spreading across the edges of underground pools, and of course, filling up cracks, holes, and containers for them to inhabit. Since their debut in the original Dungeons & Dragons white box set in 1974, they have remained a cornerstone of the game and one of the first things anyone thinks of when you ask about Dungeons & Dragons monsters. In 5th edition, their backstory and lore were expanded to include a few key interesting details. According to the Demonomicon of Igwilv and the Monster Manual, the first oozes were created by the demon prince Jublex. While reports vary on whether this was done intentionally or as a byproduct of the demon's presence on the material plane, the Faceless Lord has certainly made the most of their relationship. Thanks to this connection, Jublex can connect to, communicate with, and control any and all slimes in the multiverse, making him potentially omnipotent and omnipresent. Quote, "Oozes were inherently tenacious creatures, able to exist in some of the most hostile corners of the multiverse, and all Jublex had to do was focus his power to control them. In a sense, Jublex's true form was not the one that dwelt in his abyssal lair, but the combined volume of every brainless slime, putty, and jelly in existence." While these spawns of Jublex all have key features and behaviors that distinguish themselves from one another, they do have a few things in common. First, most oozes are passive in nature and do not actively travel outside of their territory. Much like amoebas and bacteria, they lack a clear nucleus or brain and instead are driven by a desire to maintain their body's vital functions and acquire resources for further growth. This is manifested by their constant hunger and need to consume. Helping this fact is that their highly amorphous and flexible physicality allows them to enter into almost any space that is 1 inch in diameter. This can mean anything, from cracks under the doors or sewer grates, keyholes in a container or box, to even faucets or bathtubs. Remember, if one part of the ooze can fit, it all can. They do not see, but instead rely on their blind sight to sense body heat and movement like a cross between the predator and the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. Finally, they all either have a climbing speed or spider climb ability, allowing an ooze to traverse anywhere in a room as long as some part of it is still connected to a surface. But why do oozes need to eat so much? Why are they driven by this insatiable hunger? What do they use all this energy and resources for?
We reproduce asexually. Gross, out of my way.
Okay. But in all seriousness, all oozes reproduce through some form of mitosis. One example of this is the split ability, where when a medium or larger ooze or pudding with at least 10 hit points is subjected to lightning or slashing damage, it can split into 2 new puddings. Each new pudding has hit points equal to half the original puddings, rounded down, and they are 1 size smaller than the original, meaning 1 medium will produce 2 smalls, 1 large, 2 mediums, and so on and so forth. However, oozes can also split in non-combat scenarios, such as after a large meal or when sending out a part of itself to act as a scout. And this gets at the core danger of every ooze. Given enough time and resources, there's no limit to how much it can grow and how many smaller versions of itself it can produce. While an ooze may be trapped or killed, it is rarely the only one in that area. But now that we've established most of their shared characteristics, it's time we look at a few specific examples. First up is the gray ooze. A gray ooze is described as stone turned to liquid by a combination of chaos and arcane magic fusing together. When it moves, it slithers like a liquid snake, rising to strike. Thanks to its stony origins, a gray has no issues blending into its surroundings for camouflage. It can remain motionless for days or even weeks, conserving energy until a new target enters its vision. Then, at just the right moment, when everyone's backs are turned or they're preoccupied by something else, it can reveal itself to the party and begin to slowly trap everyone, engulfing them in their pseudopods. Up next, we have the poster child of oozes, the gelatinous cube. These are the wobbling 10 by 10 feet cubes of transparent jello everyone thinks of when they refer to oozes. They are considered the most passive of their type, never seeking out prey but instead allowing it to come to them. Cubes scour dungeon passages in silent, predictable patterns, leaving pristine, empty pathways behind them. They consume living tissue while leaving bones and other materials undissolved. But while many consider the cube not a serious or joke of a threat, the graveyards of low-level player characters consumed by them tells a completely different story. The first sign a player usually gets of a cube isn't the lack of enemies or piles of bones in an empty hallway. It's when they find themselves walking straight into one and begin feeling its acidic body slowly dissolving their skin and flesh. Once discovered, a cube will continue forward towards its enemies, attacking with its pseudopods and running anything and everything down in an attempt to engulf them. An engulfed creature is restrained, can't breathe, and can't directly attack the ooze. Their only option is to pull themselves out or wait for someone else to. The next two differ from the former ones in that they are more aggressive in their consumption. These oozes do not simply wait for their target to come close and strike, but instead actively move throughout their territory, slowly tracking and monitoring any enemy that comes into their territory. The first one is the ochre jelly, the more direct of the two. Ochre jellies are yellowish blobs that can slide under doors and through narrow cracks in pursuit of their prey. They are described as dark yellow amoebas that can reach 15 feet in diameter and weigh up to 5,600 pounds. Like cubes, they prefer dungeons as they provide plenty of corpses and small creatures such as bats, rats, and insects for them to feast upon. This is because, unlike other oozes, jellies are exclusively meat eaters. Its digestive enzymes dissolve flesh quickly but have no effect on other substances such as bone, wood, and metal. Because of this, their bodies have adapted to be more perceptive and mobile than other oozes, making it easier for them to pursue their targets. They have enough bestial cunning and danger sense to avoid large groups of enemies, instead choosing to attack stragglers and isolated targets. They bide their time, waiting for their targets to tire or separate, then strike when they least suspect. In contrast, black puddings are described as the silent killers. These heaving mounds of sticky black sludge love to stealthily slink down the halls of abandoned structures and caves. In dim passageways, the pudding appears little more than a blot of shadow. This can be a great tool for building tension and horror in your story. Just imagine, every time the party makes a perception check, they see a small part of the darkness around them pulsate or shift in the light. Did their own shadows just hesitate? Why can't they see through the darkness if they have dark vision? And what's that smell? Finally, once their backs are turned, the pudding can make its move. What makes them so dangerous is their corrosive form. Flesh, wood, metal, and bone all dissolve when the pudding ebbs over them. Only stone remains, wiped clean as if nothing had ever been there. Next, we come to the most dangerous of the ooze category, the oblex. Created by everyone's favorite mad scientists, the mind flayers, these hive-minded psionic slimes were made to be a new type of ooze that have two distinct features: a brain and the desire to eat more of them. Specifically, they eat their victims' memories, as it provides both nourishment and a personality for the ooze. To quote Morning Canyon Presents Monsters of the Multiverse, an oblex wants memories, but not to serve any end of its own making. Oblexes are hungry for memories and personalities because they are empty without such nourishment. In this way, they serve their creators, the Illithids. An Oblex in the range of an Elder Brain's powers provides everything necessary for the Mind Flayers to find choice victims. As a result, Oblexes are far more clever and capable than most other oozes. Like the ochre jellies, they are clever hunters that target the smartest and most cerebral members of a group, such as spellcasters or ambassadors. But unlike the jellies, they know how to come up with a plan. An Oblex will first study their prey, sending out smaller versions of themselves to learn about the abilities and weaknesses of their targets. When ready, they work alongside other oozes and lure the targets into a trap they cannot hope to escape. Once sprung, an Oblex engulfs their target, slowly draining their minds until they are left either delirious, mentally damaged, or dead. Higher level Oblexes, such as the Adult and Elder, also have more dangerous abilities. First, they have limited access to spellcasting thanks to their psionic abilities. While most of these spells are not directly harmful, instead being used to charm opponents or read minds, they can be quite bothersome for a party if used in the right scenario. But by far, the most dangerous and intriguing part of the Oblex is their next ability. When large enough, an Oblex can detach a part of itself to take on the appearance and sound of a medium or smaller humanoid that it had consumed. While in this form, the newly created doppelganger keeps all of the skills, mannerisms, and voices the victim had. They are nearly indistinguishable from the original, making it almost impossible to spot them as the faker. However, they do all share one very open tell: their smell. All Oblexes reek. They smell like sulfur and their most recent victims, making it easier for perceptive players to notice something is off. However, a smart Oblex will still try to distract from this using their environment and situation. They may claim to have been attacked by a black pudding or rudderkin, two common dangers in the Underdark, notorious for their bad smell. So while they can't remove the smell entirely, they can certainly bluff it for a few minutes. Personally, I like to make a comparison to Clayface from Batman the Animated Series, a shapeshifter with the ability to change their form and create smaller clones of themselves that can act as spies or scouts as needed. I particularly like the episode Growing Pains, where Clayface creates a smaller version of himself using a part of his mud to create a little girl that at first believes themselves to be separate from the individual, but ultimately returns back and becomes a part of Clayface once more. I can interpret this as a situation where they discover a prior scene NPC that is at first unaware of their connection to the Oblex, but once it's revealed, it becomes a mindless slave to the ooze, forced to attack them. Really lean into the tragedy and body horror of this element, if your party is comfortable with that. And last but not least, we have a rather unusual entry, the Slithering Tracker. Born from vengeful spirits, these oozes are 1 part undead spirit, 2 parts liquid ooze, and all parts dangerous. According to Monsters of the Multiverse, the ritual for creating a slithering tracker is known to hags, liches, and priests of gods of vengeance. It can be performed only on a willing creature that hungers for revenge. The ritual sucks all of the moisture from the subject's body, killing it, while its mind lives on in the puddle that issues forth from the remains. A slithering tracker tastes the ground it courses over, seeking any trace of its prey. To kill, the tracker rises up and enshrouds a creature, attempting to both drown them while draining its blood. But achieving revenge is almost never the end for a tracker's existence. Some remain aware of their purpose and extend their quest to vengeance against others, but most of the time, their minds can't cope with being trapped in a liquid form, unable to communicate or interact with the world in meaningful ways. This drives them to madness, becoming overwhelmed and attacking indiscriminately until it is destroyed. A perfect example of a Faustian bargain. Giving up everything for revenge, but realizing all too late what they truly lost. And those are the 6 main types of ooze NPCs in 5th edition. While a few of them have alternate stat blocks for different challenge ratings, the differences in key features and attacks are mostly minimal. And that's because of how oozes are used in the game. As I said at the beginning of the video, it's important to understand that oozes function in a primarily passive role. They aren't the final bosses at the end of a dungeon, nor the scheming masterminds manipulating everyone behind the scenes. Even the Oblex, with all of its psionic powers and shape-shifting abilities, is very rarely its own boss. Instead, most oozes are either willing or unwitting servants to more intelligent NPC groups. Many cultures in the Forgotten Realms, such as kobolds or goblins, regularly capture oozes to use as guards or traps. They keep the caves and catacombs clean and are easy to control. Just keep feeding them at a distance. Kobolds in particular have a knack for using oozes in combat, either by throwing them out of jars or placing them at the bottom of a pit trap. In addition, cults of Jublex view oozes as an extension of their god and will grow and care for them like a living idol or even pet. I personally recommend checking out Stibble's Codex of Companions if you want more advice on how your party can raise their own ooze pet if they want to. But these interactions highlight the core aspect of oozes. They are an environmental threat, a hazard that forces the party to think outside of the combat box. They encourage players to be more creative with their role-playing and strategies. Treat them more like a puzzle than an enemy. Since many have a climbing speed or spider climb ability, feel free to give them the literal drop on the party for an unexpected surprise. For a quick example, describe an entrance to a room as being opaque or difficult to see through. Maybe give perceptive players a visual or auditory cue like a floating coin or a soft, squelching sound. Then, once the ooze is revealed, keep consistent with its actions by describing what goes in and how it's consumed. The D&D Beyond article, How to Play Oozes Like Body-Devouring Terrors by Jeremy Blum, does a great job of explaining how dangerous an ooze can be. He explains, unlike a normal monster that might be satisfied with killing a character, oozes are motivated by the undiscriminating desire to consume everything in their path. So when role-playing an ooze, lean into the more visceral and body horror descriptions. Play up their identity as mindless, parasitic flesh eaters. Use creative imagery such as writhing, ravenous liquid cement or mindless mounds of muck. Don't be afraid to punish bad decisions or force your party to retreat. They're one of the best monsters for creating a sense of hopelessness and panic in a party. So go all out, get goopy, and continue having fun playing one of the greatest role-playing games in the world.